Human touches the alien girl's pulse by accident, and the alien girl says the pulse is sinking to him. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. David Carter had never imagined that a simple mission on a foreign ship would change the course of his life. As a spacecraft engineer, he was used to working with alien technology, though nothing had prepared him for the stunning, almost otherworldly creature that stood before him. Zalira was unlike anything he had ever seen before. With glowing, sapphire blue skin, tall and graceful, her eyes were sharp, glowing like twin beacons in the dim light of the ship's corridor. She stood with a quiet intensity, her presence commanding and yet alien, as though she was both a visitor and someone whose existence had far more meaning than he could comprehend. David had been assigned to fix a malfunction in the ship's main engine, and upon his arrival in the restricted area, he had not expected to encounter anyone, much less a being of such striking appearance. As he moved to inspect a panel near the engine, his hand brushed against the side of the ship. In the same instant, Zalira stepped forward, and as if drawn by an unseen force, their hands met briefly, just for a moment, but enough to send a ripple through the air. David felt a sudden warmth spread up his arm, an almost electric jolt running through him. It was unlike anything he had felt before. His heart rate quickened as a strange pressure filled the air around them. Zalira's eyes widened slightly as her hand lingered on his, her breathing becoming more shallow, her body trembling just a little. "Your pulse," she murmured, her voice soft yet intense. "It's syncing with mine." David blinked, unsure of what she meant, but there was a certain truth in her words that resonated deep within him. He could feel it too, a strange connection that seemed to grow stronger the longer they stood there, hands still touching. Her fingers were cool to the touch, yet there was something almost magnetic about her presence, pulling him closer with an energy he couldn't explain. "How?" he asked, his voice betraying the confusion he felt. Zalira looked at him for a long moment, her eyes narrowing slightly as though searching for something inside him. "It's a bond," she explained. "A connection between our hearts, between our species. It happens rarely, but it happens." David's mind raced, trying to make sense of the words she had just spoken. Was it possible? Was there something more to their encounter than just an accidental touch? The silence between them stretched for what felt like an eternity, the tension thick with unspoken questions and emotions. Despite his best efforts to remain professional, David couldn't shake the feeling that something deep within him was awakening, something he had never felt before. As the ship's hum reverberated through the floor beneath them, David realized that whatever this connection was, it was far beyond anything he had ever known. Zalira's pulse, syncing with his own, was just the beginning of something much greater than either of them could anticipate. David stood there, hands still lingering in the air after his brief contact with Zalira. The sensation in his chest hadn't faded. It was as though a low hum had taken root within him, vibrating along his ribcage, syncing with something deep and ancient. His thoughts were scrambled, attempting to make sense of the impossible connection that had just formed between him and this alien being. Zalira, for her part, remained still, her piercing eyes locked onto his, a faint tremble in her fingers betraying the calm facade she had tried to maintain. She too felt it. It was undeniable. The pulse, once a soft, irregular rhythm, was now in sync with his own, as though their very hearts had begun to beat in unison. Zalira broke the silence first, her voice quiet but firm. "This bond, it's rare," she said, her gaze not wavering. "I've never experienced anything like this before, even in the long history of my people." David couldn't speak at first. His mouth felt dry, his mind overwhelmed with the gravity of the situation. He had spent years among aliens, working with different species, but nothing had ever prepared him for this. This deep, inexplicable connection that seemed to transcend species, even the physical laws of the universe. "What does it mean?" David asked, his voice hoarse. He needed answers. He had to know what this was. Zalira took a deep breath, as if steeling herself for something difficult to explain. It means that for some reason, we are tied together now. Our hearts, our pulses, our very beings are linked. She paused, her gaze flickering briefly to the ground before meeting his eyes again. It is not just a physical connection. It is deeper. It binds our fates in ways I cannot fully comprehend yet. David shifted uneasily on his feet. So what now? Is this some kind of gift? He asked, his tone laced with skepticism. Or a curse? Zelira's lips twitched into something that might have been a smile if it weren't for the underlying sadness in her eyes. I don't know yet, she admitted, taking a step closer to him. Her presence seemed to magnify, filling the small space between them with an intensity that was palpable. But I do know one thing. This connection cannot be broken easily, and it will change both of us, whether we are ready or not. The weight of her words settled on David, and for a moment, the entire ship seemed to go still. The hum of machinery, the quiet rustle of the air vents, everything faded into the background. All that mattered was the strange and undeniable bond that had been forged in that fleeting moment of contact. Zelira stepped back slightly, her hands clasped in front of her, as though she were searching for the right words. We must be careful, she said softly. Such a bond is not without consequence. David swallowed hard, trying to process what he was hearing. Consequence? Yes, she said, her voice low. There are forces in the universe that seek to control such bonds, to exploit them for their own purposes. We are not the first to experience this, but we may be the first to survive it. David could feel his heart pounding in his chest as the reality of the situation began to sink in. He had no idea what he had just stumbled into, but one thing was certain. His life would never be the same again. I don't know what to do with this, he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't ask for any of this. Zelira's eyes softened. Neither did I, she replied. But here we are, and now, we must face what comes next, together. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. David nodded slowly, unsure of what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel completely alone. They were bound together now, not just by the accident of their touch, but by something much deeper, something that neither of them fully understood. But David knew one thing. He wasn't going to back down. He was in this now, no matter where it would lead. And whatever dangers they would face in the future, he would face them with Zelira by his side. The days that followed were a blur for David. He couldn't stop thinking about Zelira, about the bond that had formed between them so unexpectedly. Every time he looked at her, he felt that strange sensation, the sync of their pulses, the subtle energy that seemed to pulse in the air whenever they were near. It was as if their fates were intertwined, and there was no way to escape the pull of it. Zelira, for her part, seemed as lost in the connection as David. At first, she maintained her usual composure, but there were moments, brief, fleeting, when he saw a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes, a vulnerability she rarely allowed anyone to see. The ship's corridor was silent, save for the quiet hum of the engines and the faint sound of footsteps. David had been walking alongside Zelira. Both of them headed for the control room, where they had been working to fix the ship's navigation system. The bond between them had not diminished, but neither of them knew how to address it, how to make sense of it. David, Zelira said, her voice cutting through the silence. Her tone was softer than usual, as though she were treading carefully with her words. I've been thinking. David glanced at her, noting the way she seemed to hesitate before continuing. This bond, it is not just about our hearts or pulses, she said. It's deeper than that. I can sense your thoughts, your emotions, sometimes even your fears. David felt a chill run down his spine. You can sense what I'm feeling? He asked, the weight of her words settling over him. Zelira nodded, her eyes meeting, his with a seriousness he had never seen before. Yes, I can feel your confusion, your doubts, your reluctance to accept what has happened between us. She took a step closer to him, her gaze never leaving his. I don't want to invade your mind, David. But this bond, it is affecting both of us in ways we don't fully understand. And I fear that we may be drawing the attention of forces we cannot control. The intensity of her words hung in the air, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. David swallowed hard, trying to process what she had just said. He had known, in the back of his mind, that this connection between them was not ordinary. But hearing it from Zelira, hearing her admit that there were consequences, made it all the more real. What kind of forces? David asked, his voice barely a whisper. Zelira's expression grew darker. I cannot say for certain, but I know that there are those who would seek to exploit our bond, to use it for their own purposes. This connection is rare, David. And when something is rare, it becomes a commodity. David felt a knot tighten in his chest. He had never thought of their bond as something that could be used against them. But now that Zelira had mentioned it, the possibility seemed all too real. What should we do? He asked, his voice steady, but the uncertainty still clinging to him. Zelira's eyes softened, and for a moment, she looked almost vulnerable. We must be careful. We must protect each other, not just from external threats, but from the bond itself. It will change us, David. It already has. David nodded, his heart heavy with the weight of her words. They were in this together, whether they were ready for it or not. And as much as he feared what lay ahead, he knew that he would face it with Zelira by his side. Whatever the future held, he wasn't going to face it alone. David stood at the edge of the control room, watching the stars streak by outside the ship's windows. The deep hum of the engines had become a constant presence in his mind, soothing but never quite enough to drown out the questions swirling inside him. The connection between him and Zelira had only grown stronger with each passing day. It was like an invisible thread that tugged at him constantly, drawing him closer to her, making him feel like they were tied together in a way that defied everything he knew about biology, about reality. He had never been a man of faith or superstition, but now, in the quiet of the ship, he began to wonder if the universe had something planned for them, something neither of them could control. He heard Zelira's footsteps before he saw her. She appeared at the door, her figure outlined by the soft blue light from the corridor. She was silent for a moment, as if she, too, was lost in her own thoughts. David, she said, her voice steady but carrying a weight he could feel deep in his chest. He turned toward her, their eyes meeting. We've been avoiding the truth, haven't we? David felt his heart rate increase, the way it always did when he was in her presence. The truth about what? He asked, his voice betraying a slight edge of uncertainty. Zelira's eyes softened, but there was a sharpness to them, as though she had come to terms with something he had not yet grasped. About what this bond means. About how it's not just a connection, it's a part of something larger. She stepped closer, her gaze unwavering. We are not the first to experience this kind of bond, David, but we may be the first to survive it. He felt a chill run down his spine at her words. What do you mean, survive it? He asked, his voice a little more tense now. Zelira took a deep breath. There are forces, ancient ones, that seek to control such bonds. They see it as a weapon, a way to manipulate not just the individuals involved, but entire civilizations. David's mind raced, his grip tightening on the control panel in front of him. He had always known there were dangers in the galaxy, but this was something entirely different. How do you know this? Zelira met his gaze, her expression both resigned and resolute. Because I've seen it. I've felt it. She paused, taking a step back. It's not just the bond we must fear, David. It's the others who will try to take it from us. Silence fell between them, heavy and thick, as David processed her words. The connection between him and Zelira had never seemed like a threat. But now, in the wake of her revelation, he could feel the weight of the danger looming over them. What do we do? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Zelira's gaze softened, but there was a fierce determination behind it. We protect each other. We stand together against whatever is coming. David nodded slowly, the realization settling in that they were in this together, whether they were ready for it or not. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew that with Zelira by his side, he was no longer alone. Whatever came next, they would face it together. And for the first time since the bond had begun, David felt a strange sense of calm. The uncertainty was still there, but now, it was balanced by a quiet strength. Whatever was coming, they would meet it head-on, together. David stood silently beside Zelira, the weight of her words still hanging heavily in the air. The tension in the control room was palpable, a quiet hum of machinery surrounding them, but not enough to drown out the thoughts racing through his mind. He had never considered that their connection could be anything more than a strange twist of fate, something that would pass as quickly as it had come. But Zelira's words had shattered that illusion. This bond between them was not just something personal. It was something that could affect not only them, but the entire galaxy. He looked at Zalyra, her expression determined yet weary, as if she carried the weight of something far older than the ship they were on, far older than the stars themselves. "We're in this together," David said, more to himself than to her. The realization settled in deeper than he expected. Zalyra gave a small nod, her eyes never leaving his. "Yes," she replied, her voice steady, though he could sense the weight of her own fears buried beneath. "Together, we face whatever comes." It was strange, this unspoken bond that had grown between them. It was as though their minds were somehow linked, their thoughts dancing around the edges of each other. David could feel the concern radiating off her, the same as his own. Yet, there was also something else, something almost comforting in the way they could connect without words, without trying. The ship's navigation system beeped softly, signaling the arrival of another planet in their path. Zalyra moved to the console, her long fingers gliding across the touchpad with practiced ease. "We'll land soon," she said, her gaze shifting back to him for a brief moment. "And when we do, we'll need to be prepared." "Prepared for what?" David asked, his brow furrowing. Zalyra's eyes narrowed slightly, her voice dropping to a whisper. "For them. The ones who will come for us once they realize the bond is real." David's stomach tightened at the thought. He hadn't wanted to think about it, but the truth was unavoidable now. Whoever was after the bond they shared, they wouldn't stop until they had control over it, over them. "How do we fight them?" he asked, the uncertainty in his voice betraying him. Zalyra straightened, her posture suddenly more rigid. "We don't fight them with weapons," she said softly. "We fight with our connection, with the strength we've built together." David wasn't sure what she meant, but he trusted her. There was no other option, no other choice. The bond had created something between them, a silent strength that seemed to pulse in the air around them, filling the space between them. "What if we can't protect it?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Zalyra's expression softened, but her gaze was unwavering. "We will," she said, her voice full of conviction. "Together." The word echoed in David's mind, a quiet promise between them, a pact that neither of them had asked for, but had no choice but to honor. Together, they would face whatever challenges came their way. Together, they would protect what they had. As the ship descended toward the unknown planet, David felt a strange peace wash over him. He didn't know what awaited them on the surface, or how they would fight the forces that sought to tear them apart. But one thing was certain, he wasn't facing it alone. And for the first time since this all began, he felt ready to face whatever came next. As the ship finally touched down on the planet's surface, David couldn't shake the sense of unease that had settled in his chest. The quiet hum of the engines died down, leaving a thick silence in the control room. He glanced over at Zalyra, who was already moving toward the airlock, her expression calm, but her eyes betraying a flicker of concern. This planet was unknown to them, a mystery they had to uncover in order to protect the connection they shared. He followed her, his steps heavy but resolute. The moment the airlock opened, a rush of cool air filled the room, and the atmosphere of the planet hit them. It was crisp and fresh, the kind of air that felt alive, as if the very ground they stood on was teeming with something greater than what they could understand. David took a deep breath, trying to calm his nerves. They had come here to hide, to protect themselves from the forces that sought to control their bond. But as he stepped out onto the alien world, he realized that the true danger might not be from the outside, it might be from within. The landscape before them was vast and unfamiliar, a sprawling wilderness of tall, luminescent trees and wide open spaces that stretched to the horizon. The sky above was a soft lavender hue, and twin moons hung in the distance, casting a faint glow across the terrain. It was beautiful, almost surreal. Zalyra's voice broke through his thoughts. "Stay close," she said softly, her tone a mix of command and caution. "We don't know what's out there." David nodded, taking a step closer to her. They moved together through the alien forest, each step cautious but filled with purpose. The bond between them still pulsed softly, a reminder that they were tethered, no matter what lay ahead. They didn't speak much as they walked, but the silence wasn't uncomfortable. There was a quiet understanding between them, a shared sense of purpose. As they moved deeper into the forest, the air seemed to grow thicker, charged with something David couldn't quite place. He glanced at Zelira, who was now scanning the surroundings with heightened awareness. "What do you feel?" David asked, his voice low. Zelira paused, her eyes narrowing as she focused on the horizon. "The bond is stronger here," she replied, her voice barely audible. "It's as if the planet itself is amplifying it." David's heart skipped a beat. He had never thought of their connection as something that could be influenced by their environment. But if this planet was indeed amplifying their bond, it could be a blessing or a curse. They continued forward, every step taking them further into the unknown. The forest around them was eerily quiet, with only the occasional rustle of leaves or the distant call of unseen creatures breaking the stillness. It was peaceful, but there was an underlying tension, a sense that something, or someone, was watching them. After what felt like hours, they reached the base of a large, ancient-looking structure. It seemed to be a relic from a time long past, its stone walls covered in strange, glowing symbols. Zelira approached it cautiously, her fingers brushing against the cool stone as if searching for something hidden. "This is it," she said, her voice almost reverent. "This is where we'll find the answers." David stood beside her, his gaze fixed on the structure. He had no idea what answers lay ahead, but one thing was certain, they were in this together. Whatever came next, they would face it side by side. The ancient structure loomed before them, its stone walls etched with glowing symbols that pulsed softly, almost as if they were alive. Zelira moved closer, her steps slow and measured, her eyes fixed on the symbols as if they held the key to everything they sought. David followed, his heart pounding in his chest. The air around them was thick with anticipation, a sense of something significant hanging in the balance. Zelira's fingers brushed against the stone, tracing the intricate patterns that seemed to shift and change under her touch. "These symbols," she murmured, her voice filled with awe. "They are old, older than anything I've ever seen. This place is not just a relic. It's a sanctuary, a place of power." David watched her, his mind racing. He had no idea what they had stumbled upon, but he could feel the weight of it, the gravity of this moment. The bond between him and Zelira seemed to resonate in the air around them, growing stronger as they stood before the structure. It was as if the very energy of the place was feeding into their connection, amplifying the already powerful link between them. "What does it mean?" David asked, his voice barely a whisper. Zelira turned to him, her eyes filled with a mix of wonder and apprehension. "It means we are not alone in this," she replied. "This bond, this connection we share, it is part of something much larger, something that has been waiting for us." Her words sent a chill down David's spine. He had suspected that their connection was not entirely their own doing, but to hear her speak of it in such a way made it all the more real. "We've been chosen," Zelira continued, her voice low and filled with an unmistakable determination. "Chosen to protect this place, to unlock its secrets." David's mind struggled to process everything. He had never imagined his life would take him down a path like this, one filled with alien technology, ancient power, and a bond that seemed to transcend everything he had known. "But why us?" he asked, his voice thick with confusion. Zelira's gaze softened. "Because we are connected. Our bond is not just physical. It is spiritual. It transcends worlds." She paused, taking a deep breath. "We were meant to find each other, David. And we were meant to find this place." The weight of her words settled over him, heavy and undeniable. As much as he wanted to deny it, to convince himself that it was all a coincidence, he knew deep down that this was no accident. The connection between him and Zelira was real, and it was leading them to something far greater than either of them could have imagined. They stood together, side by side, facing the unknown. Whatever this place was, whatever power it held, they would have to face it together. The bond between them was their only guide, their only strength. And with that, they stepped forward, into the heart of the ancient structure, ready to discover the secrets it held and what lay ahead for them both. As David and Zelira stepped deeper into the ancient structure, the air around them seemed to hum with a quiet energy, almost as if the walls themselves were alive, watching their every move. The symbols etched into the stone glowed more brightly now, the light pulsing in rhythm with the bond they shared. David could feel it more intensely than ever before, a strange mix of warmth and power flowing through him. as if the very essence of the place was entwining with their connection. Zalyra led the way, her pace steady but cautious, her eyes scanning every surface, every corner of the room they entered. The space before them was vast, a cavernous hall with towering columns that stretched up to a ceiling so high it seemed to disappear into the darkness. The air smelled faintly of earth and something ancient, something that hadn't seen the light of day in centuries. The only sound was the soft echo of their footsteps on the stone floor. Zalyra stopped at the center of the room, her gaze fixed on something in the distance, hidden in the shadows. "This is it," she said quietly, almost reverently. David followed her gaze and saw, half concealed in the dim light, a pedestal standing tall in the center of the room. Atop it was a stone tablet, engraved with more of the glowing symbols, the same patterns that had guided them here. It was a relic, something from a time long past, and it seemed to hold the answers they had been seeking. Zalyra approached it, her movements deliberate, as if she were drawn to it by some unseen force. David stayed a few steps behind, watching her closely. There was something in her expression, a mixture of awe and determination, that made him feel the weight of the moment. As Zalyra reached the pedestal, she paused, her fingers hovering just above the surface of the tablet. "This is the key," she whispered. "The key to unlocking everything." David didn't understand what she meant, but he could feel the truth of her words deep within him. The connection between them pulsed stronger, as if the tablet itself was calling to him, too. Zalyra's hand moved to touch the stone, her fingers brushing lightly against the cool surface. As soon as she made contact, a brilliant light erupted from the tablet, filling the room with an intensity that took David's breath away. He shielded his eyes, the light, so bright it seemed to penetrate straight to his core. The symbols on the stone shifted and changed, rearranging themselves before his eyes. And then, as suddenly as it had started, the light faded, leaving the room bathed in an eerie silence. Zalyra stepped back, her face pale but filled with understanding. "It's done," she said, her voice filled with reverence. "The bond, it's not just between us anymore. It's part of this place, part of something much bigger." David felt the weight of her words settle over him. The bond they shared had always been something they couldn't fully explain, but now it seemed to be part of a much larger plan, something that was beyond their control. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Zalyra looked at him, her eyes filled with a quiet determination. "Now, we wait. The path ahead is uncertain, but we've set everything in motion. Whatever happens next, we face it together." The room seemed to hum once more, the energy in the air thick with the promise of something greater, something they had yet to understand. But David knew, without a doubt, that they were not alone in this. Together, they had unlocked something powerful, something that would guide them through whatever lay ahead. As the light from the tablet faded, the room settled into a quiet stillness. The glow that had once filled the space now seemed to linger in the air, a faint, almost imperceptible hum that resonated deep within David's chest. He stood beside Zalyra, still trying to process the events that had just unfolded. What they had unlocked was beyond anything he had imagined. The tablet, the symbols, the connection, everything had come together in a way that felt both terrifying and exhilarating. Zalyra's eyes were fixed on the pedestal, her expression calm, but David could see the weight of what they had just done in her gaze. She seemed to be contemplating something deeper, something beyond the immediate effects of their actions. "What happens now?" David asked again, his voice steady but laced with the uncertainty he could no longer hide. Zalyra turned to him, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that spoke volumes. "Now, we must prepare," she said, her voice filled with a quiet resolve. "We've opened the door to something much larger than ourselves, something that could change the course of everything we know." David swallowed, his mind still reeling from the implications of her words. What could they have possibly unleashed? Was it something that could help them, or something that would destroy everything they had fought for? "Prepare for what?" David asked, his thoughts swirling in a whirlwind of confusion. Zalyra's gaze softened, and for a moment, her usual stoic demeanor faltered. "I don't know yet," she admitted. "But I can feel it, David. The energy here, the power, it's like nothing I've ever experienced. We've tapped into something ancient, something that could either be a gift or a curse." David nodded slowly, trying to calm the rising panic inside him. Zelira had always been the one to remain calm, to keep a level head in situations that seemed impossible. But now, even she was uncertain. That thought alone made his stomach twist. So what do we do now? David's voice was quieter this time, filled with the weight of the unknown. Zelira turned toward the exit, the light from the tablet now barely a memory. We leave this place, for now, she said, her voice firm. We need to gather our strength, figure out what comes next. The forces we're up against aren't just some rogue faction. This is bigger than anything we've faced. David followed her as she moved toward the door, his steps heavy but resolute. As they left the room, the hum of the ancient structure seemed to fade into the background, replaced by the stillness of the planet's surface outside. They had uncovered a secret, one that could shift the balance of the universe itself. But what did it mean? What would they do with the power they had unlocked? Zelira's hand brushed against his as they walked, a small gesture that grounded him in the moment. Whatever happens, we face it together, she said, her voice low but unwavering. David met her gaze, feeling the strength of their bond pulsing through him once more. Together, that was the only certainty he had left. Whatever lay ahead, whatever dangers they would face them side by side. And for the first time since they had arrived on this strange world, David felt ready. Ready to face whatever the future held. Ready to confront the forces that would come for them. Together,